Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video, and today's video is another reaction video, and this reaction was requested by someone down in the comments. I'll shout them out, like I'll put it like right now here on the screen. Thank you for requesting this video, and if you guys have any requests for me to film, like anything you want me to react to or any type of videos you want me to film, like comment them down below and I'll film them for you guys if I can, you know, if it's like possible for me. Today's reaction is a video called The Cancelled and Abandoned Disney Animations You'll Never Get to See, 1930 to 1999, and there's two parts to this video, and so I'll just do the first one right now, and then I'll do the second part some other day. This is like a long video. This is like a 20-minute video, so yeah, I don't really do long video reactions, but I'll still do them for you guys if you want me to react to anything that's long. If there's like two parts, it just won't be in the same video or posted at the same time. It'd be like separate some other day. So let's get into the video.
I'm proud to announce that we are in production of our version of Jack and the Beanstalk, and it is called Gigantic.
I know about this. I've heard about this movie, and I wish they didn't cancel it.
Gigantic was announced as Disney's 59th feature-length animated film, set to be released in March of 2018, but then it was delayed to November of 2018, then to the year 2020, with Disney eventually announcing the movie was outright canceled, despite such a bold showcase years earlier. However, Disney's history of shelving in-development animations goes all the way back to the origins of the company itself. So rather than make a top 5 or 10 video of Disney's canceled feature-length animated films, let's explore all of them.
Yeah. Alice in Wonderland. They already made Alice in Wonderland.
When deciding the company's first feature-length animated film,
and I love the animated one.
Had another choice before Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, an adaptation of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Of course, Disney had already found success with his Alice comedies in the 1920s, which combined animation and a live actress, but he wanted to take them one step further. In 1931, he purchased the rights to Sir John Tenniel's artwork for Alice in Wonderland, and hired actress Mary Pickford for the role of Alice. Test footage with the actress in full costume was filmed, and while the footage has yet to surface, a few images have, along with the actress wearing the Alice dress for publicity. However, with the news that Paramount Pictures was developing a live-action adaptation of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Disney changed his mind, instead focusing on another adaptation, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
I mean, they did do a good job, but like, why did they have to cancel it?
Not one to give up easily, the Alice film was revived once again, but this time it would be entirely animation.
Alice in
I honestly debated about including this one, as technically it was reworked into the 1951 film. But this version was so drastically different in terms of the original script and frankly nightmarish visuals I couldn't resist. Also, this version went far enough along in development to have a like-a-real screening for Walt, essentially storyboards of the entire film set to music and vocal performances. However, Walt Disney wasn't too happy with the darker visual approach, and again put the animation on hold, but enough to surface to offer a glimpse of what terrifying it could have been.
What is that? Morgan's Ghost.
In Morgan's Ghost, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy own a small tavern. One day they meet a parrot named Yellowbeak, who just so happens to have a map of Pirate Henry Morgan's treasure. They all decide to find the treasure together, but Yellowbeak is parrot-napped by the villainous P, and the gang are forced to walk the plank and set adrift at sea. They wash ashore on the island the treasure is buried, and stumble upon what they think is Captain Morgan's treasure. It turns out it was actually a decoy chest, and sets free the ghost of Captain Morgan and his crew. And thanks for setting them free, they decide to help the gang rescue Yellowbeak and find the real buried treasure. However, since they're ghosts, they're not allowed to tell them exactly where it is, because dead men tell no tales. Yellowbeak is eventually rescued, and the story ends with the gang setting off to find the real buried treasure, once they uncover its true location. Morgan's Ghost would have been the first film to feature Mickey Mouse's redesigned appearance, as well as the first feature-length film to include the iconic trio. It would have also been the first instance of Disney using the phrase, "Dead men tell no tales," which of course later became the signature quote from Pirates of the Caribbean.
That looks creepy.
Morgan's Ghost was ultimately shelved due to World War II and the studio's change in priorities. This nearly bankrupt Disney, as while inspirational and important to the country's morale, they were far from profitable. Long story short, Morgan's Ghost was eventually reworked and drastically shortened into a comic book starring Donald Duck and his nephews. However, aside from the very basic plot and a few characters, it bears little resemblance to the original film that almost was.
Well, the Gremlins. Oh, I heard about this.
Before Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Matilda, or James and the Giant Peach, the first publication by author Roald Dahl was a book called The Gremlins in 1943. What makes this one particularly interesting is that he wrote this book specifically for the Walt Disney Company and was originally supposed to tie into a feature-length animated film of the same name and story. However, despite the book receiving wide praise and selling extremely well, copyright issues with another pilot who claimed Dahl stole parts of the story put the movie on hold. With an oversaturation of World War II films and the war soon coming to an end, the film was abandoned entirely.
Oh, wow. What's this? I don't know how to say that.
In 1937, Disney produced the animated short Little Hiawatha about a Native American child who travels by canoe to hunt the various animals in the forest. Little Hiawatha eventually corners a rabbit, but can't bring himself to harm the creature even after giving him a way to defend himself and decides to spare his life. Moments later, he stumbles upon a very angry mama bear, but the animals of the forest protect him as a sign of thanks and respect.
So it was that Hiawatha came to end his day of hunting. And the beaver called his
so
brother,
cute!
helped him
It's
as
so
he journeyed home.
cute! I have not
The
seen this,
Silly
but
Symphonies
it's so cute.
cartoon was loosely inspired by the Song of Hiawatha, a long-form poem written in the 1850s. The animated short was a huge hit with audiences, and Walt Disney wanted to adapt the Song of Hiawatha
They
into a
should have
feature-length
continued with
animated
it.
film. Work began on
Like,
Hiawatha in the mid to late 40s.
I mean, I knew I would have watched it. It'd probably been good.
Before it was ultimately shelved, as at this time the Walt Disney Company was facing financial problems. However, the entire film had already been written and storyboarded and was very, very close to going into full production. And unlike most in this episode, we have a very detailed account of the entire story. Hiawatha began with the arrival of white men to a Native American village, who tell them the story of their chief, Hiawatha. In the time of war among Native American tribes, the Master of Life appears and sends a prophet to help guide their way, who is named Hiawatha. After a montage showing Hiawatha as a child and becoming an adult, he's eventually called to a meeting where he learns about another tribe camped near their food supply. Hiawatha suggests a peace treaty and goes to the camp, but discovers they've already begun harvesting their rice, where he locks eyes with Minnehaha, and it's love at first sight. He returns and suggests the tribe simply share the rice, but his tribe decides war is the only option, out of fear of losing their food supply for the winter. Hiawatha goes on a spiritual journey and encounters the spirit of maize, who offers a solution. He follows the spirit and eventually arrives to the Lost Valley, which is filled to the brim with enough corn to feed an entire tribe or more. As his tribe prepares for war, Hiawatha harvests the corn, and just before the battle begins, he convinces the chief there's enough food to provide for both tribes, and is granted permission to seek a peace treaty. The other tribe agrees, and Hiawatha finally connects with Minnehaha. A love story develops between the two
I'm sorry about any
characters,
background
who eventually
noise.
marry and bring the tribes together.
Just
in
ignore it,
peace.
I'm sorry.
However, many years later, a plague represented by a mist of death is set upon both tribes by an evil magician named Pearlfeather. Many die, including the chief and Hiawatha's wife. Hiawatha sets out to destroy the evil Pearlfeather, and after battling his serpents, he challenges him, ultimately killing the wizard and ending the plague. The villages are now free of the disease, and the film ends with Hiawatha setting out into the sunset. So while the animation was never finished,
That movie
much
sounds
of
so
the
good.
artwork,
Like, what the
character renderings,
hell
and some
Disney?
aspects of the plot would serve as a
Bring this
major
movie back or
influence on
something
the
like that.
1995 animation Pocahontas.
I love Pocahontas.
Not long after work finished on 101 Dalmatians and looking for new projects,
that movie was
Disney
okay to me,
animators
it's not
Mark
my
Davis
favorite.
and Ken Anderson stumbled upon some concept art in the Disney archives, an abandoned loose adaptation of the French play Chanticleer. Though initially put on hold in the 1940s, Walt Disney was intrigued about reviving the animated film and requested work begin from scratch. The basic story revolved around a vain rooster named Chanticleer, who leads a barnyard of animals that believe his crows the reason the sun rises each and every morning. The story also featured a villainous fox named Reynard, adapted from another previously abandoned story in the 40s, whose evil plot involves exposing Chanticleer and making the animals his dinner. However, at the same time work was being done on the Chanticleer animation, production on The Sword and the Stone was also going full speed ahead. Around the same time, Walt Disney's brother Roy was urging him to put more financial importance on the theme parks and suggested to scrap either Chanticleer or the Sword in the Stone.
Yeah.
Chanticleer was chosen of the two, as humans were far less expensive and complex to animate than animals.
You know, there's been a heap of legends and tall tales about Robin Hood. All different, too.
Some of the characters and plot points loosely made their way into Robin Hood, especially Reynard the Fox. Many of Mark Davis's designs would inspire characters in the attraction America Sings, which of course later wound up in Splash Mountain. The concept art would also find its way into a children's book, basically a summarization of the movie called Chanticleer and the Fox. In the 1980s, Chanticleer was briefly revived again, but to no avail. The kind of made its way into the 1990s Disney animation Rock-a-Doodle, with very little in common with the original canceled film. The Jungle Book was the last featured film to be supervised by Walt Disney, and features beautiful animation as well as plenty of memorable characters and songs. One of these was the character of King Louie with I Wanna Be Like You, voiced and sung by musical legend Louis Prima.
You'll see it's true. Someone like me.
What
like the live action too.
You'll see it's true. Shoo-ba-doo-doo. Connect like me. Shoo-ba-doo-ba-doo-bee.
The character and song were such a huge hit with filmgoers that Disney offered Louis the chance to star in another animation, a loose adaptation of Marjorie Sharp's The Rescuers novel as Louis the Bear. Long story short, back in the early 1960s, Disney had been trying to adapt the first book in the series into a film about rescuing a Norwegian poet from a black castle in a foreign land. However, the movie was shelved, but revived when Louis Prima came into the picture. Aside from the basic idea of Louis the Bear as a performer in a zoo, details are a little sketchy, as the script had several versions. The original version saw Louis the Bear living very contentedly in the zoo, enjoying performing and relaxing on his downtime. At some point he's conned into leaving the comfort of the zoo to serve in a demented penguin's freak show. Another version seems to have had Louis the Bear simply trapped in a zoo, and with the help of the rescuers escapes to freedom. A later version had Louis befriending a girl named Penny, and when she goes missing, sends a message to the rescuers to help track down his new friend. Louis composed and recorded many songs for the film, which proceeded into the 70s. But with a heart attack in 1973 and the discovery of a brain tumor 2 years later, it seems he removed himself from the film.
After 4 years in production, comes the crowning achievement in Disney animation and storytelling.
The movie was completely reimagined without Louis and was released in 1977, but tragically, the iconic singer would pass away the following year. To this day, only one of Louis Prima's songs as originally written and recorded has officially been released by Disney, but many hope other songs from the abandoned Rescuers movie will eventually see the light of day.
Catfish Band.
If you've ever ridden Splash Mountain and noticed a sign reading Catfish
I haven't,
Bend,
with
you
the
might be
Disney
surprised to
World
know
or
this
Land
was
in
a
like a long
feature-length
time.
animation that was supposed to tie into the ride. Much like Song of the South, which does tie into the ride, but Disney would simply rather have you forget it ever existed, as it's yet to see an official release in the US on any video format.
I guess as long as I live, I'll always remember
What
the
is
Bird
that
Rabbit
movie?
stories.
Yeah, if you guys know that
The
movie, let me
great,
know.
wonderful man who told them, Uncle Remus.
This movie would have been good. Like, not there.
Catfish Bend was to be an
I mean, I
adaptation
would
of
have
the
watched
books by
it.
author Ben Lucien, which contains stories about creatures and animals living along the banks of the Mississippi River. The rights were sold to Disney in 1977 and was to be released 3 years later. But aside from the artwork produced by Disney legend Ken Anderson, little is known about the story specifics. Unfortunately, Catfish Bend was given the axe in favor of Oliver and Company, so that makes 2 Splash Mountain tie-ins unavailable to the public.
I'm gonna leave it old place.
Well,
You mean you leave your brother? That I am.
music Kana.
One of Disney's most popular musicals is Fantasia, but few realize that Walt Disney's initial
it's
vision for
okay.
the film was to be re-released every year with new segments. While this never became a reality, in the late 70s, a sequel of sorts began development by the name of Musicana. The animated feature was to be very similar to Fantasia, featuring beautifully animated segments set to classical musical themes and compositions. However, unlike Fantasia, Musicana was set within countries all around the world, as opposed to the more fairy tale fantasy theme of the original. One segment was Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, with the characters depicted as birds instead of humans, following the classic tale with a Disney twist. Another was Finlandia, about the battle between the forces of nature, which resulted in the formation of the Great Lakes of Scandinavia. There was also The Emperor and the Nightingale, featuring Mickey Mouse as a servant of the Emperor of China, which followed the classic story by Hans Christian Andersen. Then there was The Rain God, which would have been set in Africa, telling the story of a monkey who steals a diamond from the rain god, who refuses to make it rain until the diamond is returned. There was also a sequence set in South America, based on Aztec and Incan mythology. Finally, there was By the Bayou, about a colony of frogs living in the deep south who sing jazz, and would have featured a musical composition by Louis Armstrong. The sequence would humorously end with a riverboat washing away the frogs as they finished their performance. Unfortunately, Disney executives grew concerned over its commercial viability and was cancelled in favor of The Fox and the Hound. Though Fantasia would eventually have a sequel in the form of Fantasia 2000, we're left to wonder about the classic that could have been with Musicana.
Where the Wild Things Are. I love this movie. This movie is like my favorite movie.
The rights for the beloved children's book Where the Wild Things Are was acquired by Disney to be an animation first. A traditionally hand-drawn feature-length animation utilizing three-dimensional backgrounds and effects.
This is the vector test for Where the Wild Things Are, which Magi Symphovision did for Disney Studios. Each piece of vector animation must be modeled and shaped. In this case, the characters were painted by computer.
Artists Glenn King and John Lasseter were given the task of producing test footage, and while it proved incredibly successful, Disney believed this would be far too expensive for an entire film. What's interesting is how the concept of traditional animation against a CGI background of prop eventually became very common in Disney animations of the late 80s and 90s. Granted, it was never for the entire film, but enough to prove just how groundbreaking this concept was for the time, and would be utilized less than a decade later, despite its high production cost. The rights for Where the Wild Things Are eventually went to Warner Brothers, who produced a live-action adaptation many years later, which in my personal opinion is very underrated.
It is, yeah.
But who knows, maybe Disney's version would have been yet another entry into the Disney Renaissance era.
Yeah.
Mistress Masham's Repose was to be a feature-length animated film based on the 1946 novel of the same name. The basic story is about a young girl named Maria, an orphan who lives with her uncaring and strict guardians, and the only two people in her life that show kindness, a retired professor and a house cook. One day she discovers an island in the middle of a lake, which is home to Lilliputians, who befriend the lonely girl and join her on fun adventures. It does break my rule about films that never went beyond the initial pitch, but so much beautiful concept art was created for said pitch, I couldn't resist. As to why this film never became a reality, you can blame Michael Eisner, as Roy Disney found the idea charming, but Eisner outright hated it and shelved the project immediately.
Why? Army ants.
In the late 1980s, right on the cusp of the animation Renaissance era, producer Jeffrey Katzenberg held a sort of marathon pitch meeting with artists and animators at Disney. Many of the ideas tossed around and discussed would eventually become future hits, such as Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, and Beauty and the Beast. But another was Army Ants. The premise was about a pacifist ant living and trying to survive in a militaristic colony. However, while the story was finished and delivered to Disney in 1992, it was put on hold in favor of the other ideas, which executives thought were stronger. Very little is known about the specifics of Army Ant's plot, but what we do know is that the story led to the creation of both A Bug's Life and Ants, a controversy we'll be covering in a future episode.
That's all a part one. There's gonna be there's a part 2 video which will be somewhere in the future, probably like my next reaction, or it'll be like a future reaction. I know that. Just look out for it. Like, I actually enjoyed watching this. I knew like half of these were canceled. I knew about half of these, but the other half I didn't know about, and like it was interesting. Like, I learned some things. Like I loved it. If you haven't already, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below to join my family. Also, make sure you smash that big thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. Hope you have an amazing day and on that time. I love you guys so much.